Tell the school teacher to write the check, my wife said, not even looking up from her tablet. I'm not having Connor ruin his credit or drag his business partners into your medical bills. He just closed an $18 million acquisition in the energy corridor. He's a partner now, Arthur. He has an image to protect. That was the exact moment the 31 years of our marriage evaporated into the humid Texas night air. I was sitting at the laminate kitchen island in our house in Clute, Texas, clutching an estimate from the cardiovascular clinic. My chest felt like someone was tightening a ratchet strap around my ribs, a dull, heavy ache that hadn't let up in 3 weeks. An image, I repeated. My voice was raspy, dry from 10 hours of inhaling diesel fumes and concrete dust at the freight terminal where I drive a container handler. Martha, the clinic needs $6,200 before they'll even schedule the specialist for the endovascular repair. It's an aneurysm. If it goes, I don't make it to the parking lot. She finally swiped her screen, her eyes cold as they locked onto mine. Then you should have thought about that before you lost the Freeport acreage 10 years ago. Connor worked his fingers to the bone to wash the grease of your bankruptcy off his name. I won't let you drag him back down into the mud. She stood up, smoothed her linen trousers, and walked into the living room to take a call from our son. I could hear her voice change instantly through the drywall, soft, melodic, pride dripping from every syllable as she congratulated him on his new townhome in River Oaks. I sat there alone in the quiet kitchen, the ceiling fan ticking overhead, realizing that to my own family, I was already dead. I was just a ghost who still had the nerve to ask for gas money. But they didn't know about the mail sitting in my truck. They didn't know about the 2 certified envelopes I'd signed for at the post office on my lunch break. And they certainly didn't realize that the clever little legal trap they'd built for me 5 years ago was about to snap shut on their own necks. To understand how a man ends up a stranger in his own kitchen, you have to go back to 2014. I wasn't always a 61-year-old hourly hand smelling of sulfur and hydraulic fluid. For 20 years, I ran Vance Marine and contracting. We did bulkhead repairs, dock building, and canal dredging all along the Gulf Coast. I was good at it, good enough that in 2012, I took every dime we had saved, mortgaged our home to the hilt, and bought 85 acres of raw coastal frontage just outside the port of Freeport. The plan was a private barge terminal and industrial staging yard. It was positioned perfectly for the upcoming LNG expansion. I was hailed as a local visionary. Martha was the queen of the country club. Connor was in his junior year at Texas A&M, driving a brand new GMC Sierra I'd bought him cash, boasting to his fraternity brothers about his father's real estate empire. Then the sky fell. An old, undocumented chemical pipeline running from an abandoned refinery adjacent to my property ruptured. Over 3,000 barrels of highly toxic chlorinated solvents bled directly into our water table and saturated 40 acres of my shoreline. Because the refinery company had gone belly up in the 90s, the federal government pointed its massive, slow-moving finger straight at me. The EPA slapped a comprehensive cleanup order on the entire 85 acres. The property was locked down under a federal consent decree. I couldn't sell it. I couldn't build on it. I couldn't even use it as collateral to borrow money to pay the lawyers. Within 18 months, Vance Marine was dead. The bank foreclosed on our heavy equipment. My business partners settled their ways out, leaving me holding the bag for the outstanding vendor debts. And that's when the temperature in my home dropped below freezing. Martha didn't ask how I was sleeping. She didn't hold my hand when the panic attacks made my vision go black at 3 a.m. She asked how we were going to pay the country club dues. She asked why we had to sell her Lexus and buy a used Toyota Camry. Connor was worse. He looked at me not as a father who had survived a catastrophe, but as an embarrassment. He had to take out a student loan for his final semester, a fact he has never, to this day, let me forget. In his mind, I hadn't been hit by an environmental disaster. I had personally stolen his birthright. The only one who stayed was my daughter, Chloe. She was 17 when the collapse happened. She watched her mother scream at me until her face turned purple, watched her brother pack his bags without saying goodbye, and she just quietly sat on the porch with me. She didn't say much. She just brought me sweet tea and told me she'd help me clean up the garage so we could sell my old tools. Now, Chloe is 27. She's a special education teacher at an elementary school in Pearland. She makes $42,000 a year, drives a rusted-out 2015 Ford Focus with a bad alternator, and spends her weekends helping kids who can't read. 2 days after my kitchen table talk with Martha, I met Chloe at a little taqueria off Highway 288. The heat was thick enough to chew, the asphalt radiating a shimmering haze that made my head spin. She knew the moment I walked in. "Dad," she said, pulling out a chair for me. "You look gray. Sit down. Have you eaten?" "Just tired, baby," I said, trying to smile. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my daily logbook, where I'd tucked the cardiovascular clinic's paperwork. I couldn't even look her in the eye when I slid it across the table. I'm in a bit of a tight spot with the insurance. There's a gap in the coverage. Chloe picked up the paper. Her eyes scanned the numbers. The $6,200 due before admission. She didn't flinch. She didn't launch into a lecture about my lifestyle or complain about her own bills. "They won't do the procedure without this?" she asked softly. "No," I muttered. "The clinic coordinator told me hospital policy is strict on out-of-pocket deposits for non-emergency vascular cases. They'll wait until it's an emergency, but, well, Dr. Arispe told me if we wait for it to be an emergency, the survival rate drops to 15%. Chloe set the paper down. She took a deep breath, her face incredibly pale, but her jaw set in that stubborn line she got from my side of the family. "I'll get it," she said. "Chloe, no, you don't have that kind of money. Your teacher's salary—" "I said I'll get it, Dad," she interrupted, her voice firm. "Don't you dare call Connor, and don't ask Mom. I'll take care of it." I tried calling him, I admitted, the shame tasting like copper in my mouth. He was at a dinner in River Oaks. He told me he couldn't have his name flagged in a personal loan database because his firm is auditing their partners. He hung up on me, Chloe. A flash of pure, hot anger crossed her face, but she mastered it quickly. She reached across the table and squeezed my calloused hand. "Forget him. He spent his whole life pretending he built himself from scratch. We don't need him." The next evening, Chloe drove down to my work yard in a different car, a battered 15-year-old hatchback she'd borrowed from a colleague. She handed me a white envelope containing $6,200 in cash. "Where did you get this, Chloe?" I demanded, my hands shaking as I held the stack of $100 bills. "Tell me you didn't do something stupid." "I sold the Focus," she said, looking away, "and I took out a small personal signature loan from one of those places near the highway. The interest rate is high, but it doesn't matter. I'll work summer school to pay it off." "You sold your car? For me?" "You're my dad," she said, her voice cracking for the first time. "You spent 20 years building a life for us, and when it fell apart, they treated you like garbage. I'm not letting you die over $6,000 while they live in mansions." I went back to my truck that night and wept. I didn't cry because of the pain in my chest. I cried because of the absolute, humbling grace of my daughter and the deep, boiling fury that was finally beginning to take root in my gut toward the other two people who carried my name. The surgery took place on a Thursday. It was a 4-hour procedure. They went in through my groin, placing a custom endovascular stent graft to seal the ballooning wall of my abdominal aorta. When I woke up in the recovery room, the pressure in my chest was gone, replaced by the raw, smarting ache of the incisions and a deep, profound exhaustion. Martha didn't show up. She sent a text message at 2 in the afternoon. "Hope everything went well. Let me know when you're discharged." Connor didn't send anything at all. Chloe stayed in the waiting room the entire time. She took 3 days of personal leave from her school, slept on the vinyl recliner next to my hospital bed, and helped me walk my first shaky steps down the corridor while holding my IV pole. When they discharged me on Sunday, she didn't take me back to Clute. I refused to go. I couldn't bear the thought of sitting in that house, listening to Martha plan her next social committee meeting, while I crawled around on a surgical scar. Instead, I went to Chloe's tiny one-bedroom apartment in Pearland. It was a cramped space on the second floor of an older complex. The air conditioner hummed like an old refrigerator, and you could hear the traffic on the parkway through the glass. But it was clean, and it felt like a sanctuary. I laid on her pull-out couch, looking at her lesson plans stacked on the kitchen counter, and felt a quiet resolve settle over me. It was on my 4th day of recovery that I finally opened the 2 certified letters I'd kept hidden in my duffel bag. The first letter was from the United States Environmental Protection Agency, Region 6. I read the legal jargon 3 times to make sure the anesthesia hadn't rotted my brain. Subject property, 85 acres, Brazoria County Tract 42. Pursuant to the completed remediation phase and third-party soil and groundwater testing completed on April 12, 2026, the EPA hereby issues a no further action determination. All administrative consent decrees and active remediation liens are hereby dissolved. The site is cleared for unrestricted commercial and industrial reuse. 10 years. 10 years of paying property taxes on a piece of toxic swamp that had ruined my reputation, destroyed my credit, and turned my wife and son into my worst enemies. It was clean. It was finally completely clean. The second letter was from an entity called Gulf Coast Industrial Logistics. Dear Mr. Vance, it has come to our attention that the federal environmental restrictions on your Brazoria County acreage have been lifted. As you may be aware, the Port of Freeport is currently finalizing its deepwater channel dredging project, and our firm has been contracted to develop a regional staging terminal for heavy industrial components. Your 85-acre parcel sits directly adjacent to the newly designated rail spur and deepwater access corridor. We are prepared to offer you an immediate, all-cash purchase of $21 million, with a 30-day closing window and no financing contingencies. A formal purchase agreement is attached for your review. $21 million. I sat on Chloe's squeaking pull-out sofa, the paper trembling in my hand, and for the first time in a decade, I let out a breath that didn't feel like it was scraping my lungs. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel like celebrating. I just felt a cold, hard, mathematical certainty. I didn't call Martha. I didn't call Connor. I called Gene Miller. Gene was an old-school real estate attorney in Angleton who had represented me back in the '98 boom days. He was 70 now, sharp as a freshly stropped razor, and he'd been the only lawyer who hadn't charged me a retainer just to answer my phone calls when the business went under. "Arthur," Gene said, his voice deep and gravelly through the receiver. "I heard you had some plumbing work done on your heart. You doing all right, old friend?" "I'm alive, Gene, thanks to Chloe." I took a slow breath, guarding my stitches. "I need you to look up some old paperwork for me. I need it in my hands before the end of the week." "What are we looking for?" "The postmarital partition and property agreement from 2020. Gene went dead silent for a long moment. I could hear him shifting papers on his desk. "I remember that document, Arthur. I told you back then not to sign it. I told you it was a raw deal." "I didn't have a choice, Gene. Connor had just graduated law school and started at his firm. He sat his mother down and convinced her that my outstanding debts from the marine contracting business were going to wipe out her retirement account and get the house seized. He brought in his own corporate buddies to draft it." "Yeah," Gene spat. "It was a slick piece of work. They stripped you of every joint asset you had. They gave Martha the Clute house, her personal accounts, and her entire inheritance from her mother's estate as her sole, separate property. They left you with nothing but the corporate liabilities and the Freeport land," I finished. "They forced me to take 100% sole ownership of the 85 acres because they thought the EPA liens were going to bankrupt me personally, and they wanted to make sure none of that liability could ever touch Martha's assets." "That's exactly what they did," Gene said. "They legally partitioned your estates. Under Texas Family Code, once that agreement was signed and notarized, your assets became strictly separate. There is no community property left between you and Martha." "Gene," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper, "does that agreement have a future value waiver clause?" "Give me an hour, Arthur. Let me pull the scanned copy from the county archives. I'll call you right back." It took 40 minutes. When my phone rang, Gene didn't even say hello. "Arthur, you're not going to believe this," he said, sounding younger than he had in years. "The language Connor's friends put in here to protect Martha is absolutely ironclad. They wanted to make sure that if the EPA ever came after you for civil penalties or cleanup costs, Martha could prove she had zero financial connection to that land. Listen to this. Each party hereby waives, relinquishes, and forever disclaims any and all community property interest, marital claim, or equitable right to any appreciation, future income, sale proceeds, or development value derived from the separate property assets listed in Schedule A. And Schedule A, my friend, is your 85 acres of Freeport dirt." I closed my eyes. "So if that land is sold, it's yours, Arthur. 100% yours. Martha has no legal claim to a single penny of the proceeds. Neither does Connor. They locked themselves out of your estate to keep from sharing your debts, and they did it so thoroughly that even a Supreme Court judge couldn't undo it." "Good," I said. "Now here's what we're going to do. I want to accept the offer from Gulf Coast Industrial, but I want the entire transaction structured through a newly established, irrevocable trust." "Who's the trustee?" Gene asked. "You are, Gene. And the sole, absolute beneficiary of that trust is going to be Chloe Vance. I want her to own the trust outright. I want her to have full control of the funds the moment the sale closes. I don't want my name on a single bank account or asset title. If I die tomorrow, or if I live another 20 years, I want every dollar of that $21 million to belong to the girl who sold her car to keep her father's heart beating." "And what about Martha?" Gene asked, his tone quiet, respectful. "Martha wanted to protect her lifestyle," I said. "She's got her house. She's got her retirement. She's got her brilliant son. Let her keep them." The next 3 weeks were a blur of quiet, intense legal work. I stayed on Chloe's couch, pretending to do nothing but watch television and heal. Every morning after she left for school, I would take a taxi down to Jean's office in Angleton. We signed the deed covenants, executed the purchase agreement with Gulf Coast Industrial, and finalized the Vance family irrevocable trust. The buyers were in a massive hurry to secure the deepwater access before the port's final funding phase, so they pushed the closing through in 22 days. On a Tuesday afternoon, Jean called me into his office. He handed me a single sheet of paper. It was a wire transfer confirmation from the escrow agent. The net proceeds, after taxes, legal fees, and the outstanding corporate debt payoffs, were $17,480,000. It was sitting in a secure treasury account under the name of the Vance Trust, with Chloe Vance listed as the sole primary beneficiary. "It's done, Arthur," Jean said, leaning back in his leather chair. "Your daughter is officially one of the wealthiest young women in Brazoria County, and not a soul knows about it but us." "Not yet," I said, "but they're about to." The confrontation didn't happen because I went looking for it. It happened because Connor's glittering, perfect world finally developed a crack, and his first instinct was to come scrape the bottom of my barrel. It was a Thursday evening, exactly 4 weeks after my surgery. Chloe had just gotten home from school. She'd brought home some paper plates and a grocery store rotisserie chicken, and we were sitting at her small kitchen table eating dinner. There was a sudden, violent banging on the apartment door. It wasn't a polite knock. It was the heavy, rhythmic thudding of someone who believed they had the right to demand entry. Chloe looked up, startled. "Who is that?" "I think I know," I said. I stood up, adjusting the brace around my torso, and walked to the door. I pulled it open. Connor stood there. He was still in his professional uniform, a tailored navy suit, his silk tie loosened just enough to look busy, his hair perfectly coiffed. But his face was flushed, sweat glistening on his temples, and his eyes were wild in a way I'd never seen before. Behind him stood Martha, her designer handbag clutched to her chest like a shield, her expression a mix of high society panic and deep, seething anger. "Arthur," Martha pushed past Connor, stepping into the tiny apartment without being asked. She looked around the small living room, her nose wrinkling at the smell of the rotisserie chicken and the sight of my medication bottles on the counter. "Thank God you're here. We've been calling your phone for 3 hours." My phone was on silent, I said, closing the door behind them. "What's going on, Martha?" Connor didn't waste time with pleasantries. He stepped directly into my space, his chest puffed out, though I noticed his hands were shaking. "Dad," he said, his voice tight, high-pitched, "we need to talk about the Freeport property, right now." I walked back to the kitchen table, pulled out a chair, and sat down. Chloe stood behind me, her hand resting protectively on my shoulder. "What about it, Connor?" I asked. "I got a call this afternoon from a colleague in the commercial title registry," Connor said, his words tumbling out of him in a desperate rush. "He told me Gulf Coast Industrial just filed a deed transfer memorandum for Tract 42, your 85 acres. He said the recorded sale price was $21 million cash." Chloe's hand tightened on my shoulder. She looked down at me, her eyes wide with shock, but she didn't say a word. She stayed quiet, watching them. Martha stepped forward, her voice trembling with a strange, frantic energy. "21 million, Arthur? Is that true? Tell me that's true." "It's true," I said, my voice completely flat. "The sale closed on Tuesday." Martha let out a sound that was half gasp, half sob. She reached out and grabbed Connor's arm. "Oh my God, Connor, we're saved. We're actually saved." "Saved from what?" I asked, looking at my son. Connor swallowed hard. The smug, invincible partner from River Oaks looked suddenly very small, very fragile. I made a mistake, Dad. A major mistake. I took out a short-term bridge loan to fund my buy-in for the partnership at the firm. I used some of my personal stock portfolio as collateral, but the tech sector took a hit last week, and the bank called the margin. If I don't liquidate $400,000 by Monday morning, they're going to foreclose on my assets, flag my credit, and the firm's compliance board will strip me of my partnership. My career will be over before it even starts. 400,000, I repeated. That's a lot of money for a school teacher's father to have lying around. Connor's face darkened, his old arrogance flickering back to life for a brief second. "Don't do this, Dad. Not now. You just cleared over $17 million after taxes. 400,000 is pocket change to you now, and Mom needs her share too. She's got $30,000 in credit card debt she hasn't told you about, and the roof on the Clute house is leaking." Martha nodded quickly, her eyes wide, pleading. "Arthur, we've been through so much. 10 years of misery. 10 years of living in that small house, driving used cars, pretending everything was fine while our friends went on cruises. We paid our dues. We survived your failure. It's only right that we get to enjoy the recovery." I looked at my wife of 31 years. I looked at the woman who had turned her back on me in our kitchen when I was coughing up blood. who had told me to ask our daughter for money so her son's precious image wouldn't be tarnished. "You survived my failure?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "Is that how you see it, Martha?" "Arthur, please." "No," I said, standing up. The movement hurt, but I didn't care. I stood at my full height, looking down at the two of them. "Let's talk about survival. When the EPA locked that land down, I didn't just lose my business. I lost my soul. I spent 10 years driving a yard mule for $18 an hour, coming home with grease in my pores and a spine that felt like it was being ground into sand. And what did I get from you? You wouldn't even look at me. You treated me like a bad smell in your perfect house." "We were stressed, Dad," Connor yelled. "Do you know what it was like for me? Having to tell my friends that my father went bankrupt? Having to explain why I had to take out a student loan?" "Oh, the horror," I said, my voice dripping with venom. "A student loan. Chloe took out a payday loan at 22% interest, Connor. She sold her only car, the only way she had to get to her job, just so she could give me $6,200 in cash so the surgeons could patch up my heart. Where were you that night, Connor? You were eating $60 steaks in River Oaks, telling me you had an image to protect." "I didn't know it was that serious," Connor stammered, his face turning a deep, ugly red. "You always exaggerate your health issues." "And you," I said, turning to Martha, "you told me to ask the school teacher for the money. You told me not to ruin Connor's big celebration. My own son had millions in credit lines and a partnership on the horizon, and you told me to ask the girl who makes $42,000 a year." "Arthur," Martha whispered, tears finally spilling over her cheeks. "I'm your wife. We have a life together. You can't just throw 31 years away because of a bad month." 31 years? I reached into my back pocket and pulled out a folded packet of papers. I tossed them onto the kitchen table, right next to the rotisserie chicken. "You threw those 31 years away 5 years ago, Martha. You and Connor." Connor looked at the papers. His eyes widened as he recognized the document. "The partition agreement." "That's right," I said. "The post-marital partition and property agreement. The one you had your fancy corporate lawyer buddies draft. The one you sat me down and forced me to sign because you were terrified my business debts would touch your precious assets." "That was just to protect Mom," Connor protested, his voice cracking. "It was standard asset protection." "It was," I agreed, "but you were so greedy and so determined to make sure I got nothing that you drafted the future value waiver as a bilateral disclaimer. You wanted to make absolutely sure that if I ever went completely under, the creditors couldn't argue that Martha had any equitable interest in the land. Under Texas law, that agreement converted the Freeport property into my sole, separate estate. Martha has no legal claim to a single foot of that dirt, or a single cent of the $21 million we received for it." Martha's face went entirely slack. She looked at Connor, her voice rising in a panicked shriek. "Connor, what is he talking about? Is that true?" Connor didn't answer. He was staring at the paper, his mouth open, his breathing shallow. He knew. As a lawyer, he knew exactly how airtight his own trap was. "But that doesn't matter," Connor whispered, his eyes darting around the room like a trapped animal. "You're still married. If she files for divorce, the court will split the marital estate." "There is no marital estate, Connor," I said. "You guys stripped me of the house and the savings 5 years ago. The only asset I had left was the land, and that land is gone. It's been liquidated." "Then the cash..." "The cash isn't mine," I said. Martha gasped. "What do you mean it's not yours? You just said you closed the sale." I reached over and took Chloe's hand. "The entire sale was structured through an irrevocable trust, the Vance Trust. The funds were wired directly from the escrow company into the trust account on Tuesday. I don't own a single dollar of that $17 million. I am not the trustee, and I am not a beneficiary." "Then who is?" Connor asked, his voice barely audible. I looked at my daughter. "Chloe is. She is the sole, absolute owner of the trust. Every single penny belongs to her." The silence that fell over the room was so thick you could hear the hum of the old refrigerator. Martha turned slowly to look at Chloe. The look on her face wasn't anger. It was a desperate, clawing hunger. She stepped toward her daughter, her hands outstretched. "Chloe, sweetie," Martha said, her voice shaking with a sickening sweetness. "You know your brother is in trouble. You know we've always loved you. We're a family, Chloe. You can't let your brother lose his career over a stupid mistake. You have $17 million now. You can buy us a new house, pay off Connor's loan. We can finally be the family we were meant to be." Chloe looked at her mother. She didn't look angry. She didn't look vengeful. She just looked incredibly sad, with a deep, quiet pity that was far more devastating than any shout could have been. "When Dad was sick," Chloe said, her voice steady and clear, "I called you from the hospital room. I told you he was in recovery and that his blood pressure was fluctuating. Do you remember what you said to me, Mom?" Martha blinked, her mouth working but no sound coming out. "You told me you were at a trunk show in Houston and that you'd try to stop by on the weekend if the traffic wasn't too bad," Chloe said. "You didn't come. You went to brunch with your friends instead." "Chloe, I was busy. And you, Connor," Chloe said, turning her gaze to her brother. "I called you too. I asked you if you could just lend me $2,000 so I wouldn't have to take out the payday loan. I told you I'd sign a contract to pay you back with interest out of every single paycheck. You told me to stop enabling Dad's laziness and hung up on me." "Chloe, that was business," Connor cried, stepping forward, his hands clenched. "You don't understand how the corporate world works. I couldn't have my name on a—" "I understand exactly how the world works now," Chloe said. She reached over to the kitchen counter, picked up her phone, and tapped the screen. "Gene Miller wired the funds to pay off my signature loan this morning, Connor. It's gone. I don't owe anyone a single cent. And this afternoon, we finalized the purchase of a 3-bedroom house on 2 acres in Friendswood. It's got a wraparound porch and a big garage where Dad can build his woodwork projects without smelling diesel fumes. It's already paid for, in full, by the trust." She set the phone down. "As for the rest of the money," Chloe continued, "it's staying exactly where it is. I'm staying at my school. I'm going to fund the special education reading lab we've been trying to build for 3 years. And Dad is never going to work another night shift in his life." "You can't do this," Connor screamed, his face contorted in a mask of pure, ugly rage. He slammed his fist onto Chloe's small laminate table, rattling the paper plates. "It's my money. I worked my life to get away from his failure. You're a school teacher. You don't even know what to do with $17 million. You're going to ruin us." I stepped between Connor and my daughter. The pain in my chest was gone, replaced by a surge of adrenaline that made me feel 20 years younger. "Get out," I said. "Dad, you can't—" "Get out of my daughter's home, Connor," I said, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous rumble. "Before I forget that I'm still healing from surgery and show you exactly what a 61-year-old yard hand can do to a boy who slams his fist on his sister's table." Connor looked at me. He saw the grease still etched into the lines of my face, the heavy shoulders that had spent 10 years lifting cargo chains, and the cold, dead certainty in my eyes. He stepped back. "This isn't over," he hissed, though his voice lacked any real conviction. "I'll find a lawyer. I'll contest the trust. I'll prove you hid assets during the marriage." "Go ahead, Connor," I said. "Call your lawyer friends. Tell them to read the partition agreement you signed as a witness. See how many of them are willing to take your case when they realize you're the one who drafted the very clause that locked you out." Martha was weeping openly now, a quiet, desperate sound as she realized the country club life, the River Oaks townhome, and the illusions of grandeur were all slipping away into the humid night. "Arthur," she whispered, "please." "Goodbye, Martha," I said. "I'll have Gene send over the divorce paperwork on Monday. Since you already own the Clute house and your retirement accounts as your sole separate property under your own agreement, it should be a very quick, very clean process, just like you wanted." They left. They walked out of that small, second-story apartment, down the concrete steps, and out into the gravel parking lot. Through the window, I watched them get into Martha's 10-year-old Camry. Connor didn't even open the door for his mother. He just slammed his own door, put his head on the steering wheel, and sat there in the dark. I turned back to the kitchen. Chloe was sitting at the table, her hands wrapped around her sweet tea glass. She looked up at me, her eyes wet, but her mouth curved into a soft, beautiful smile. "You okay, old man?" she asked. "I'm perfect, baby," I said. I sat down across from her, took a piece of the rotisserie chicken, and smiled. "I'm absolutely perfect. For 10 years, I thought I'd lost everything on 85 acres of wet dirt. I thought my name was ruined, my life was over, and my family was a casualty of a bad investment. But I was wrong. The land didn't ruin my family. It just showed me who they really were. It took 10 years and a $6,000 heart surgery to clear the weeds away so I could see the only thing that actually mattered. And as I sat there in that small Pearland apartment with my daughter, listening to the hum of the window unit and the quiet night traffic, I knew that $21 million couldn't buy what we already had. But it was sure going to make the next 30 years a lot of fun.